Tips from Trestle is brought to you by the Belcher Companies, Navigator Group Purchasing, eMenu Choice Point of Sale, and Clark Food Service and Equipment. Welcome to Tips from Trestle, the Senior Living Food and Hospitality Podcast. This podcast explores the senior living industry with a unique focus on food, hospitality, and the community experience. I'm your host, Aaron Fish. During 3 decades in the hospitality industry, I focused my work on creating exceptional experiences for the customers we serve. My goal for this podcast? Educate, inform, and inspire leaders in senior living. How? By creating hospitality with a purpose, by bringing the customer experience to the front of mind in our industry. We should bring the passionate spirit of food and hospitality to everything that we do and everyone we serve each and every day. So what are we waiting for? Let's get to it. Joining me today on Tips from Trestle is Josh Crisp. In addition to his duties as host for the industry-leading Bridge the Gap podcast, Josh is a senior living executive with over 15 years of experience in development, construction, and management across the Southeast. Josh is founder and CEO of Solinity, a senior living development and management and marketing company designed to reshape the industry to better meet the needs of the aging and create intergenerational communities. Josh, thanks for joining me today on Tips from Trestle.
Yeah, Aaron, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I was excited to connect with you. You know, we've got to know each other through the Bridge the Gap Ambassador Group, which has been amazing for me and getting to know the industry better. And everybody knows you as one of the BTG guys, right? But I want to dive into your experience as an executive in senior living. You've got so much great experience and background in that. And I just want you to kind of, just a couple minutes here, tell us a little bit for our listeners about your background in developing and managing communities.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And you're right. So many people think that I am a full-time podcaster because Bridge the Gap's so well known. And while I have a blast doing that, it's definitely not my day job. So now I'm in my 18th year as a developer, owner, operator. And I'll be honest with you, having come not from a senior living background, not from a healthcare background, I found the industry through real estate. I was a real estate broker, worked my way through college doing that. When I found the industry, I was blessed to be part of a startup. I was out of Houston. And during those years, got to learn every aspect of the development, opening communities, repositioning communities. And so, after 9 years, we had successfully created a very large platform of independent assisted memory care and adult daycare programs throughout the Southeast. And we found ourselves part of a publicly traded, vertically integrated health system. And shortly after that, had the opportunity to launch out on my own as a consultant to help developers that didn't understand our industry, how it worked, build their platforms, help their vision become realities. And that led to Solinity. So now we are a turnkey development company, management company, and a marketing agency that helps developer owner operators around the country. So very passionate about it and love what you do. It's such a huge part of that whole process.
Yeah, and one of the things I wanted to lean on with your experience was the kind of some of the changes we see in the industry, right? From that development management standpoint, what are you seeing with the changes and how they're impacting how we operate communities these days?
Well, so that's a big question to unpack in a limited time, but I'll just kind of hit the high level, and there's obviously a lot of trails we could chase, but just in my tenure in the industry, it's changed rapidly. I know when I was first in, uh, if you walked into pretty much any community, I think in my first 9 years, I toured about 300 communities to just learn. And that was all over the country. But what I found was most of them were extremely similar, other than maybe the finishes. You walk in and it's basically the same services, the same food program running, everything was just kind of one place to another didn't feel a lot different. So for me, what we've experienced and what I've seen over the last several years is just what I would describe as variation in service
Mhm.
offerings and product type and even physical plant variation. And I think that marks the change that we've been talking about is coming, and it is happening. And I think that it's just going to be exponential over the coming years as needs, wants, preferences, and also price points are radically changing, and that impacts every aspect of planning and development.
I had a kind of a brief interaction on Twitter or X or whatever we're calling it these days. And the conversation was around this kind of trend towards like hyper localization of senior living communities and how that can be a struggle for developers and owners who are kind of covering a big swath of area. You're in the southeast and covering that's a lot of territory. And so how do you look at that balancing meeting those local demands with trying to create programs and services and support for a wide berth of communities over a large area?
Yeah, well, it's an increasing challenge for both the development side of the business and the management side because, putting my real estate developer hat on, you're obviously really focused on the real estate and being able to scale. And, our business, our industry, as opposed to a lot of other verticals like multifamily and such, is so operator centric, is so
Mhm.
resident centric. And as we know, just society in general now, there's such a focus on experiences, right? And everybody has different preferences for what experience they want. And there's so much, like you said, for the local experience. Well, when you're trying to scale on the real estate side, it's much easier for a developer to find a floor plan that looks good on a pro forma and go find a market that they have the density and saturation penetration rates to be able to support that from a pro forma and go get it funded and do it over and over and over again.
Yeah.
But that's very becoming increasingly more difficult from the developer standpoint because of what we're starting to talk about, which is, what, because of preferences, needs, and because of changing demands that we're going to have to not just deliver services and products, housing to the top 10, 15% of society, but there's this whole middle market that is also many different price points.
Yeah.
So you have to really understand the location you're going into and not only develop your housing model towards that, but your service model and your price point to that. And a big aspect of that is knowing how to manage, knowing how to run the operations, which again gets to this point where I think your more successful um, projects, for lack of a better term, your more successful communities are going to be the ones where you've either got a great partnership that's between a developer and a management or operating entity where the operator and manager is really quarterbacking the program from, selecting the market, designing the building, those sort of things, or it's an integrated model, which we're seeing a lot of, which
Mhm.
is the developer is the owner operator. And we've seen so many announcements in the industry lately that some of these great long-term experienced operators are now actually becoming developers for this very reason, I think.
Yeah. Everything you say makes so much sense. And that, like, kind of taking it back from the hyper local, it's really more about understanding the market and can a floor plan or a footprint or a service package or amenity package make sense. And so it kind of leads me into wanting to just kind of pick your brain a little bit about thinking about food and hospitality when you're creating some of those models around service and amenities. And so you look at developing a property, how do you make sure that like the food and hospitality and that community experience kind of reflects the essence of what your brand is or what your model is in that location? Today, I want to tell you about one of Tressel's senior living partners, Belter. Belter is a food service design, equipment, and supply company that has been providing expert guidance to the food and beverage industry for nearly a century. A strategic partner to the most successful food service operations in the country, Belter provides support in kitchen and bar design, equipment procurement and install, and supplies. Their team of senior living food service experts have experience across the continuum of care. From independent living to skilled nursing and CCRCs, Belter specializes in right sizing new facilities, modernizing remodels, and providing the right food service equipment and supplies. At Belter, they are committed to creating memorable experiences for their customers and their guests. With their top notch team and a global network of quality supplier partners, their customer focused approach is built on a foundation of collaboration and decades of industry experience. So, thank you for considering Belter for all of your food service needs.
Yeah, well, I would say, at the most easy way to think or talk about it, it's really understanding the market that you're entering holistically, right?
Mm.
So, and I'll give you some of my rookie mistakes that I learned many years ago. I was developing and opening communities from, Tennessee all the way down to South Texas. And at that point, early in my career, I hadn't operated too many communities. And so, the demographics looked similar, but I didn't understand some of the cultural differences between South Texas and East Tennessee. And, for me, I kind of learned the hard way that understanding, the dietary preferences and, or you could even say as strong a word as needs,
Mhm.
hands were much different between those two markets. And therefore, not only was my menus going to have to be different, but I had, very different type of style of dining rooms and delivery methods. I even had different equipment list for cooking that I had to have because I was basically trying to deliver one footprint, one equipment list, and scale that on the development model and the operational model. And what I realized is once I actually started serving the meals, the people in East Tennessee did not have the same palate and want the same delivery system and nor the same price point as some of the markets in the Southeast. So, or the Southeast and the Southwest. So for me, our approach is first going back to really understanding that demographic, and it requires some boots on the ground.
Yeah.
So, and some partnerships, getting to know and the local neighborhoods. And so that was my first, is just having the information. And then honestly, a developer and even an operator, you can't be specialized. There's so many different departments
Mhm.
within, so many different service functions. And especially for a small regional operator, you can't always have on your payroll an expert in everything. And so,
Yes.
it's quickly finding out what kind of partnerships could I forge that are specialties, specifically in dining and hospitality, that not only understand that vertical within your community, but have the expertise in that specific market where they know and understand and can inform the decisions from when you're actually designing the kitchen, when you're designing the dining room, when you're designing the other potential places where you would serve or have some dining or food experience or hospitality experience. So much you kind of set yourself up for success or failure, even just at the design and the pro forma level. Because if you're just picking numbers and putting in things to a spreadsheet to potentially please your ownership group, well, guess what? They don't forget about those numbers when you open the community,
Yeah.
and they're reminding you, hey, you told me that we were going to be able to hit this margin
Yeah.
or this food cost and this, and it's different. And so that's been, I guess, the biggest thing that I've learned, and our focus is on the development, is just really understanding what product and service we need to deliver for that local market.
Yeah, I think you make a really great point, especially because, yes, there are some really big players in our industry, but the vast majority of communities are being operated by these small and medium sized regional operators, and they don't have the bandwidth, they don't have the resources for that. And so finding those regional partners or those specialty partners makes so much sense to make sure you hit all the right notes to develop the program. And so to kind of put on your marketing hat here for a minute, when you've got a really well executed food and hospitality program, uh, how does that impact the role in attracting potential residents and really differentiating a community in that marketplace?
Well, it's a huge opportunity. That's what I would say. When I think about marketing at the community level, you know, there are so many potential success stories that you can share. We don't overcomplicate marketing. Now, marketing is complex in and of itself nowadays with technology and all the different
Mhm.
things that are being used and implemented. But once you have those tools in place or a partner agency to do that, the real key is in the content, right?
Yeah.
And one of the challenges of our industry is we have traditionally not taken the time to invest in what I call mining for the love stories, whether that's on the team member side, whether that's on the resident, the family, or the partner provider. And so that's number one is I guarantee you with a quality food program, you are going to differentiate yourself from many providers because as we've all heard that are in the business, what's the number one complaint in senior living communities? It's the food program, and it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be. And honestly, we just haven't done a real good job of finding and telling the success stories. And so you think about it, if that's one of the most important things to us as humans each day is what we're
Mhm.
consuming. And second, we know that it's potentially one of the most important things to the resident in their community when they're seeking out communities, then why shouldn't we be very intentional in working to produce those success stories that I call love stories and then sharing those in your market? So what you typically see is stock photos of what looks like two very well put together residents dining
Uh-huh.
at what's like a five-star resort.
Mhm.
Nothing wrong with that at all. But I would say most markets, that's not the environment that most people have experienced throughout their whole life. And that's probably not what everybody can afford or even would want at every meal. So I think you have the opportunity with your imaging, your visuals, and your storytelling to differentiate yourself in the market by what you're doing in your food division.
Yeah, I love the way you frame it around creating the love stories, right? Because I think about food, right? I mean, I've been doing it for forever, but it's really like it's a passion, right? Like people really, I mean, they're tied to their food and how they eat and what they won't eat. And I think there's so many touch points and so many really great opportunities just from the staff and the resident connections that come from it, plus the visuals. I mean, you get somebody who can create great food, even just as simple as like a great like jambalaya, if it's put together well and photographed well. I mean, that could just really be impressive and it can meet the market. So that's such a great point that you make about doing those kinds of things. And so kind of as we come to a close here on our conversation, how do you as an operator kind of infuse that sense of community and connection into your senior living spaces? We talked about food and hospitality, but I also like to think about the overall community experience. And so I'd love to get your kind of broad picture on how you can do that from that operator developer level as you look down.
A Navigator is the largest full-service GPO that exclusively focuses on the senior living community. And what that means is we provide products and services that help our members provide a great environment for their residents, such as like MRO, hospitality equipment, food, business products, as well as technology solutions. We actually surround our members with a level of support unmatched in the industry.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of ways. Obviously, the design of your physical plant, the community itself, the bricks and mortar can really help you or potentially hinder you from creating those kind of experiences. So first of all, what start with the end in mind, right? Don't
Yeah.
start with what looks good on a pro forma. Start first with what is the experience I'm trying to create here and who am I trying to create the experience for? What group or what groups? And if you start with that in mind, it's amazing how and get in that perspective. So, for example, I mean, we're human, right? We're at this age. Most of us, we have our favorite places to go and hang out with friends. And there's a reason for that, right? It's welcoming, it's an intentional space, and it's designed specifically for that type of interaction. So you start that same way. And again, don't overthink that. The second is really think about what we were talking about earlier, is like who you're serving. And I will say, for far too long in our industry, the whole design was really around the care of the resident. And do not hear me saying that that does not need to be one of your highest, if not your highest.
Yeah.
There's more than that, right? Because, especially with our emerging generation of older adults, older population that we're serving, they don't want to quit living when they get to your community. And so we have to equip them at whatever level of assistance or frailty that they may have to be able to keep living. Think about it too, from also your number one, arguably your number one asset for your community is not the physical plant itself. It is the team that you have. So what kind of experience and environment are you providing for that team? We know everybody stays up at night, all operators, because of labor related challenges.
Yeah.
But what if you could make it an environment that they actually looked forward to going to? And what if they were just as excited about the engagements and the experience they're going to have with the residents as just a service that they were delivering to the residents? So I think those two groups, and then you look at the kind of this third group, which is everyone else, right? A community is not just a care center. It's not just a place to work, but it's a place that should be inviting people to continue living their life. We don't live in isolation. Yeah, we went through a couple of years of feeling very isolated. You saw how well that did.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
what we should be thinking about is, how do we bring in the community? How do we make this feel and respond and become part of a vibrant community that it's within? So how do we invite, and how does that community become a fabric of the greater community that it's in, and not just the place where the old folks live? So that's our approach. And I know that's a very macro level, but with that mindset, if you start there, it informs a very intentional response to design, budgeting, and operational planning.
Yeah, I love this idea of, we started with caring for our residents, kind of their physical care. And really what we're doing is we're taking that care bubble and we're expanding it to all of these other aspects and all these other like audiences and groups that we're supporting. I think it's such a great way to have that big picture look at it. So I love what you're saying there. So as we kind of wrap up today, Josh, I'd love for you to be able to tell our listeners, how can they connect with you? How can they, obviously they need to go and subscribe to Bridge the Gap podcast. Like, tell us all the good information on how to get in touch with you.
Yeah, so no shortage of ways to get in touch with me. And obviously there's, I wear a lot of different hats. So I will say, if you want just a big snapshot at the life of Josh and all that I'm involved in, joshcrispofficial.com gives you links to not only Salinity development, Salinity management, Salinity marketing, but also our philanthropic arm at Pedal for Alzheimer's, as well as Bridge the Gap, the awesome media network that I have been blessed to get to know you and hundreds of other folks through the network. And so I appreciate the opportunity for me to share that.
Absolutely. Well, Josh, thank you so much for sharing your perspective and kind of just letting our listeners know what developers really are thinking when they think about food and hospitality and that community experience.
Well, it's an honor, and appreciate what you do, Aaron, for the industry. Have been doing for years, and it's really exciting to see your launch of the last few years. And now I see you everywhere. So congratulations.
Appreciate it, sir. Thanks for joining me today on Tips from Trestle. So there you have it, another one in the books. Thanks again, everybody, for listening. Please follow, like, and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts, and follow us on Twitter at Tips from Trestle. You can also learn more about the work I do by following me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and even TikTok. And be sure to check out Trestle Hospitality Concepts at www.trestlehospitalityconcepts.com. I'm your host, Aaron Fish, and this has been another episode of Tips from Trestle.